Every pill bottle has a label. Every label has a name. I remember every name Troy Henning told me to stop caring about. My name is Margaret Cernak. Most people call me Maggie. I am 58 years old. I have been a licensed pharmacist for 31 years. I have filled prescriptions for babies who could not swallow solid food and for dying men whose hands shook too hard to open a childproof cap. I have called doctors at 2 in the morning because a dosage looked wrong. I refused to fill a prescription on Christmas Eve because the interaction profile would have put a 70-year-old woman into cardiac arrest. I have never had a single board complaint filed against me. Not once. In 31 years. Troy Henning had an MBA and a spreadsheet and 3 years at a logistics company before someone at ValueScript decided he should be in charge of the pharmacists in the Northeast District. He had never touched a pill bottle, never read a package insert, never looked a patient in the eye and said, "This combination concerns me. Let me call your doctor." He looked at pharmacies the way a man looks at a bottling plant. Throughput, yield, units per hour. I want to tell you what happens when someone like that gets to decide how fast someone like me is allowed to care. I grew up behind a pharmacy counter. My father, Walter Cernak, opened Cernak Family Pharmacy in Darby, Pennsylvania in 1971. It was a narrow shop on a busy corner with a soda fountain that had not worked since 1983 and a bell on the door that never stopped ringing. My father knew every regular by name, by condition, by preference. He knew Mrs. Garza needed her metformin in the morning or she would forget. He knew Mr. Phelps was afraid of needles and needed extra patience when his insulin prescription changed. He knew the Kowalski boy was allergic to penicillin because he had been the one to catch it 8 years before any hospital chart recorded it. My father used to say, "Every prescription is a promise. The doctor writes the promise. We keep it." I grew up watching him keep it, every day for 32 years. Cernak Family Pharmacy closed in 2004. A ValueScript opened across the street. The rent on the corner lot tripled. My father held on for 11 months, counting his regulars as they drifted away one by one, pulled by insurance networks and drive-through convenience and prescription plans that only covered chain stores. He closed on a Wednesday. He put the keys in his coat pocket and walked home. He died the following October. Heart attack. 67 years old. My mother said he stopped walking the day the store closed and never really started again. I had already been working at ValueScript for 2 years by then. I was the only Cernak left in pharmacy. I carried the name. I carried the rules. Double-check every prescription. Read every label twice. If something feels wrong, stop. Call the doctor. Do not let speed replace attention. Do not let convenience replace care. For the first 12 years at ValueScript, nobody asked me to do anything different. I was not the fastest pharmacist in the store. I was the most accurate. My error rate was 0.003%, the lowest in the district. Patients asked for me by name. "Can Maggie check this one?" I heard it every day. I liked hearing it. It meant the promise was holding. Then Troy Henning arrived. He came in on a Tuesday in March, 7 years ago. I remember the date because I had just finished verifying a complicated interaction between warfarin and a new antibiotic for a patient named Gerald Voss, and the verification had taken me 4 minutes instead of the standard 2. I was making a note in the system when I heard someone behind me say, "Maggie Cernak?" I turned around. He was standing in the doorway to the back office with a tablet in his hand and a lanyard around his neck. Dark blue suit, no lab coat. The lanyard said, "Troy Henning, District Manager, Northeast." He looked like he was 35. I found out later he was 32. He did not shake my hand, did not introduce himself, just turned the tablet so I could see the screen and said, "Your station is processing 23% fewer prescriptions per hour than the district average. Walk me through that." I said, "I double-check every prescription." He said, "The system already checks for interactions." I said, "The system misses things. I have caught errors the system approved." He nodded the way people nod when they are waiting for you to finish, so they can say what they were always going to say. Then he said, That is not scalable, Magnolia. My name is Margaret. He called me Magnolia. He did not even know my name. That was the first time I saw what Troy Henning actually was. He was not curious. He was not listening. He had already decided what he wanted: faster throughput, lower labor costs per prescription, higher fill rates. And the only thing standing between him and his bonus was people like me who took too long caring about the difference between the right pill and the wrong one. 6 weeks later, Troy held a regional meeting at a hotel conference room in King of Prussia. 40 pharmacists from the Northeast District, seated in rows. Troy stood at the front with a projector and a clicker. He ran through the quarterly numbers, fill rates, revenue per station, customer wait times, and then he put up a slide titled Station Efficiency Rankings. Every pharmacist's name was on the list. Fill rate per hour, color-coded, green for the top 10, yellow for the middle 20, red for the bottom 10. I was last, dead last. Red. My name glowing on the screen while 40 colleagues looked at the floor. Troy pointed to the screen and said, "Magnolia Cernak, our anchor, in both senses." He paused. He waited for the laugh. It came. Scattered, uncomfortable, but it came. I sat in the back row with my hands under the table and said nothing. I did not defend myself. I did not explain that my 0.003 error rate meant I had never put a patient in danger. I did not mention that my station had the highest customer return rate in the district because people trusted me. I said nothing. After the meeting, a pharmacist named Janet Morrow walked with me to the parking lot. Janet was 52. She had been at ValueScript for 15 years. Good pharmacist. Careful. Not as careful as me, but careful. She said, "Maggie, that was not okay. What he did up there." I said, "I know." She said, "Are you going to say something?" I said, "To whom?" She did not have an answer. Janet stopped walking with me to the parking lot after that. Not because she was angry, because she was afraid. Afraid that being seen with the slowest pharmacist in the district would put her on Troy's screen next. I understood. I did not hold it against her. But I noticed. I noticed that the break room conversations stopped including me. I noticed that the group text for shift swaps no longer had my number. I noticed that when I walked through the back hallway, people looked at their phones. That is how it works. You do not have to fire someone to erase them. You just have to make their name a liability. Troy made my name a joke, and that was enough. The isolation did the rest. But I went home that night and opened a notebook. It was a grid notebook with a soft blue cover. I bought it at a Walgreens on the way home, which felt like a small betrayal. I sat at my kitchen table in Ridley Park with a cup of cold coffee and a pen and wrote the first entry. Date, time, prescription number, drug name, prescribed verification time, actual verification time. Was there a second check? Was the efficiency timer triggered? Notes. March 22nd, 2019. My first entry. I did not know what I was doing. I did not have a plan. I just heard my father's voice. Write it down, Maggie. Paper does not forget. I filled that notebook. Then another. Then another. The routine became a ritual. Every night after my shift, I would sit at that table with a cup of coffee, always black, always cold by the time I finished, and I would write. Sometimes 1 entry, sometimes 6. I did not skip a single day. Even on the nights when nothing happened, I wrote, "No incidents today. Timer triggered twice. Both resolved under threshold." Even the absence of a problem was a data point. My father would have understood that. My apartment in Ridley Park was small. 1 bedroom, a kitchen with a window that looked out over the alley, and a bathroom where the faucet dripped. I had lived there for 9 years. I never redecorated. I never hung pictures. The only things on the kitchen counter were a coffee maker, a toaster, and the notebook. It was not a sad apartment. It was a functional one, like me. Troy moved fast. Within 4 months of his arrival, he introduced what he called the Streamlining Initiative. The name made it sound modern and clean. The reality was something else. First, he eliminated the overlap shift. Every value script pharmacy used to have 2 pharmacists on the floor from 7 to 11 in the morning, the rush window. Troy cut it to 1. One licensed RPH can handle the volume if the technicians are properly utilized. I was alone at the counter from 7 to 11 every weekday. 4 hours. No second set of eyes. No one to catch what I missed. Second, he cut the lunch break from 30 minutes to 15. "Eat at the counter if you need to," he wrote in the memo. I kept the memo. Third, and this was the one that mattered most, he introduced the verification timer. Every prescription that came through the system now had a countdown clock on the screen. 90 seconds. A green bar that shrank from left to right. If you verified within 90 seconds, the screen stayed green and logged a successful completion. If you went past 90 seconds, the screen flashed red, a bright, pulsing red that you could see from across the pharmacy, and logged an efficiency alert. The word alert appeared in capital letters. It stayed on the screen until you acknowledged it. Everyone could see it. Patients in line could see it. 3 alerts in a shift triggered a conversation with the district manager. 5 in a week triggered a formal performance review. 10 in a month triggered a performance improvement plan, the corporate euphemism for the first step toward termination. The State Board of Pharmacy in Pennsylvania requires a minimum of 2 minutes for prescription verification. 2 minutes, 120 seconds. That is the legal floor, the absolute minimum amount of time a licensed pharmacist is permitted to spend verifying that a prescription is correct, that the drug is right, that the dose is right, that the interactions are safe, that the patient will not be harmed. Troy set his timer at 90 seconds, 75% of the legal minimum. He was not just pressuring us to go faster, he was building a system that punished compliance with the law. A system where following the rules made you a problem and breaking them made you a star. I asked him about it once. I said, "Troy, the state board minimum is 2 minutes." He said, "The timer is a workflow tool, not a regulatory instrument. Nobody is telling you to skip steps. We are just measuring efficiency." I said, "You are measuring how fast we cut corners." He said, "I am measuring how fast you serve customers." Then he walked away. He sent an email the next week, district-wide. Subject line, verification timer policy, clarification. The body read, "Effective immediately, verification timers are mandatory for all licensed pharmacists in the Northeast District. Timer compliance will be reviewed weekly. Non-compliance will result in disciplinary action up to and including termination." Troy Henning, District Manager. Mandatory. Not recommended, not suggested, mandatory. And he put it in writing. I printed that email. I folded it into the notebook. I wrote it all down. The first near miss happened 4 months after the timer went live. Mrs. Dorothy Parsons, 74. She had been coming to my window for 9 years. High blood pressure, managed with amlodipine, a calcium channel blocker. Her doctor sent in a new prescription. The system filled it. I pulled the bottle. Atenolol, not amlodipine. A beta blocker, not a calcium channel blocker. For most patients, that swap would be a problem. For Mrs. Parsons, it would have been catastrophic. She had a documented history of severe bradycardia. A beta blocker would have slowed her heart to a crawl. She could have collapsed in her kitchen. She could have died. I caught it. 3 seconds before the bag went into the pickup bin. The timer was already red. I did not care. I pulled the bag, rechecked the script, caught the substitution error in the autofill system, and called the doctor to confirm the correct medication. The whole correction took 11 minutes. That night, I went home and wrote it down. Date, drug, error type, catch window, 3 seconds, timer status, red, outcome, corrected. I sat at the kitchen table and thought about 3 seconds. 3 seconds between the right pill and a stopped heart. I filed a report through the internal compliance system. Ticket number 4417. Subject, autofill substitution error, high-risk patient, near miss. 2 weeks later, the system updated. Resolved. No action needed. No action needed. Mr. Carlos Ruiz was next. 41 years old. Type 2 diabetes, managed with metformin. The system filled his prescription at double the dose, 1,000 milligrams instead of 500. I caught it during my second check. The timer was red again. I fixed it. I filed another ticket. Number 4523. Resolved. No action needed. The third one I remember clearly happened on a Thursday in September. Mrs. Helen Bryce, 81. She had been on warfarin for 3 years, a blood thinner that requires precise dosing. Too little and you clot. Too much and you bleed. Her doctor had adjusted the dose, and the new prescription came in at 7.5 milligrams. The autofill pulled a 5 milligram tablet and a 2.5 milligram tablet. Correct, but the label printed the instructions as, take 2 tablets daily, instead of, take 1 of each tablet daily. For a patient on warfarin, that distinction is not academic. If Mrs. Bryce had taken 2 5 milligram tablets, which is what 2 tablets could easily mean, she would have been at 10 milligrams instead of 7.5, a 33% overdose of a blood thinner. She could have bled internally. She could have had a hemorrhagic stroke. I caught it. I rewrote the label. I called Mrs. Bryce personally and walked her through the new dosing schedule. That call took 14 minutes. The timer flashed red before I even picked up the phone. I did not care. I wrote it all down. Then Tyler, 16 years old, ADHD. His prescription for amphetamine salts came through with a frequency of twice daily instead of once daily. The difference mattered. Doubling the frequency of a controlled stimulant in a teenager is not a minor clerical error. I called the prescribing doctor and spent 8 minutes on hold before reaching her nurse, who confirmed it should be once daily. The nurse thanked me. She said, "I do not know how that happened." I said, "I know exactly how it happened, but nobody is going to fix it unless you tell the doctor." Corrected. Filed. There were others. A methotrexate prescription that listed daily instead of weekly, a potentially fatal error since methotrexate taken daily can destroy bone marrow. An oxycodone prescription with no quantity limit flagged by the system as approved. A pediatric amoxicillin dose calculated for an adult weight. Every one of them caught by a second check. Every one of them logged. Every one of them reported. Every one of them resolved with the same 4 words: no action needed. Troy found out about the Tyler call. He came to my station the next day and said, "Why are you spending 8 minutes on a phone call for 1 prescription?" I said, "Because the frequency was wrong." He said, "The system approved it." I said, "The system was wrong." He leaned on the counter and said, "Maggie, trust the system. That is why we have it. You are not the last line of defense. You are a step in the process." I looked at him and said, "I am a licensed pharmacist. The law says I am the last line of defense." He straightened up, adjusted his lanyard and said, "The law also says I can reassign stations." He walked out. 1 week later, I was moved to the drive-through window. Troy did not tell me in person. He sent a memo. Effective Monday, M. Cernak will be reassigned to the drive-through dispensing station. This reassignment reflects an operational rebalancing to optimize customer flow and station-specific throughput metrics. Operational rebalancing. That is what they call it when they want to make someone disappear without filling out a termination form. I thought about quitting that night. I sat at the kitchen table with the notebook open and a pen in my hand, and I thought about walking away. Finding another pharmacy, a small one maybe, an independent. But there were no independents left, not in Ridley Park, not in Derby, not anywhere within 30 miles. The chains had swallowed them all. And if I left ValueScript, who would catch the next near miss? Who would write it down? Who would keep counting? I stayed. I kept writing. The drive-through window at a chain pharmacy is where they put you when they want you to stop talking to people. The glass is thick. The speaker crackles. Patients pull up, hand over a slip, wait, take the bag, drive away. There is no conversation. There is no eye contact that lasts longer than 2 seconds. You are a vending machine with a license. Troy called it a better fit for my workflow. I knew what it was. It was exile. My old station went to Kristen Wilder. 29 years old, fast, efficient, likable. Kristen could verify a prescription in 45 seconds. She never called doctors. She never questioned the autofill. She never triggered a red timer. I did not blame Kristen. I never blamed Kristen. She was doing exactly what the system rewarded her for doing. She was fast, and fast was the only metric Troy measured. If you judged Kristen by Troy's scorecard, she was the best pharmacist in the district. If you judged her by my father's rules, she was operating without a net. I watched her work sometimes, through the internal window between the drive-through station and the main floor. She moved with a kind of efficient grace, scanning, clicking, verifying, bagging, all in one smooth motion. 45 seconds, sometimes 38. She never hesitated. She never frowned at the screen. She never picked up the phone. One afternoon, I saw her verify a prescription for an elderly man, Mr. Stefano, 83, on 8 different medications. Kristen processed it in 51 seconds. I would have taken 4 minutes. Not because I was slower, because Mr. Stefano's drug list had 3 potential interactions that the auto-check did not flag because they fell below the system's severity threshold. The system said green. My training said yellow. Kristen saw green and moved on. I wanted to say something to her. I wanted to walk over and say, "Kristen, pull that one back. Check the interaction panel manually. Mr. Stefano is 83 and his kidneys are not what they were." But I was behind the drive-through glass. I was not her supervisor. I was the retro model, the dial-up modem. My opinion had been architecturally removed from the workflow. Kristen got the quarterly bonus, $2,400. She got the lead pharmacist promotion 6 months later. I got the drive-through window and a red timer every shift. The gap between us was not talent. It was willingness. She was willing to trust the system. I was not. And in Troy Henning's pharmacy, trusting the system was the only skill that counted. Troy liked to talk about me at meetings. I heard about it secondhand, always secondhand, because I was never invited to the meetings where the talking happened. Janet Morrow, who still spoke to me occasionally, always in the parking lot, never inside, told me about the summer barbecue. Troy rented a pavilion at a county park. Catered, beer, music. Every pharmacist and technician in the district was invited. Except me. I was covering the Saturday shift that Troy had assigned me. At the barbecue, Troy gave a short speech. Janet said he called me our retro model, reliable but slow, like a dial-up modem. People laughed. Janet said even the people who liked me laughed, because not laughing at Troy's jokes was its own kind of red timer. That was the kind of power he had. He could make people laugh at the person who was trying to protect them, and he could make them feel like the laughter was normal. I found out later that Troy told the same joke at the regional leadership meeting and at the quarterly review in Philadelphia. My name had become a punchline. Not Margaret Cernak, licensed pharmacist with 31 years of service and 0 board complaints, just Maggie, the slow one, the anchor, the dial-up modem, the woman who could not keep up. The loneliness was the worst part, not the red timers, not the drive-through glass, not the jokes, the loneliness. I had been part of this pharmacy for over a decade. I knew every technician's birthday. I knew which pharmacists were going through divorces and which ones had kids in college. I had covered more holiday shifts than anyone in the building. And now I was behind glass, and nobody came to the glass unless they had to. I ate lunch alone. I drove home alone. I sat at the kitchen table alone and wrote in the notebook alone. My mother was in a care facility in Westchester. I visited her on Sundays. She had dementia and did not always know who I was, but she knew I was someone who loved her, and that was enough. I never told her about Troy. I never told her about the timer or the window or the notebooks. She would not have understood. And even if she had, I did not want to put that weight on a woman who had already lost her husband to a broken heart. One afternoon, about 3 years into the timer system, Troy came to the drive-through window during a slow hour. He leaned against the wall and watched me work for a few minutes. Then he said, "You know, Maggie, this is not your father's pharmacy anymore." I did not look up. I said, "No, it is not." He said, "The industry changed. You should change with it." I said, "The patients have not changed. They still take pills and trust us to get them right." He said, "They trust the system." I said, "They trust me." He pushed off the wall and left. That was the longest personal conversation Troy Henning ever had with me. I kept the notebook current. Every shift, every incident, every silence from compliance. Year 1, 47 entries. Year 2, 63. Year 3, 81. The numbers went up because the pressure went up. More prescriptions per hour, fewer pharmacists per shift, shorter breaks, more red timers, more near misses caught by my second check. More near misses that I suspected were not caught at all because I was not at the main station anymore and Kristen did not do second checks. By year 4, I had filled 3 notebooks. I kept them in the kitchen drawer, under the phone book nobody used anymore. The phone book was from 2018. Nobody had delivered a new one since. Nobody had used the old one either. It just sat there, holding down the notebooks like a paperweight made of obsolescence. Sometimes, at night, I would sit at the table and read through the entries and feel a weight in my chest that was not anger and was not sadness. It was the weight of knowing. Knowing exactly how many times the system had almost broken, and knowing that nobody who could stop it was willing to listen. Knowing that somewhere in those notebooks was a pattern so clear that any regulator, any journalist, any attorney would see it in 5 minutes, and yet nobody was looking. I kept a running count at the back of each notebook. Total near misses caught, total red timers, total compliance tickets filed, total resolved with no action. By year 4, the counts were near misses caught personally, 47, red timers triggered, over 200, compliance tickets filed, 14, resolved with no action, 14, 100% closure rate with 0% action rate. That is not a compliance system. That is a filing cabinet designed to make problems disappear. The compliance tickets were the worst part. Not the red timers, not the drive-through exile, not Troy's jokes, the tickets. Because the tickets proved that I had done the right thing. I had reported every near miss, every staffing concern, every timer violation, and the system had absorbed it all and done nothing. 14 tickets, over 4 years. Each one filed according to procedure. Each one logged with a number and a timestamp and a subject line. Each one resolved the same way. Resolved, no action needed. I started screenshotting the resolutions. I saved the screenshots on a USB drive I kept in my purse. Paper does not forget, but neither does a flash drive. The formal audit came in year 5. Corporate sent an auditor from the regional compliance office, a man named Dennis Pratt. He wore a gray suit and carried a clipboard and spent 45 minutes in the pharmacy. He checked the controlled substance log. He checked the refrigerator temperature. He watched one prescription get filled. He asked if there were any concerns. I said, yes, the verification timer is set below the state board minimum. Staffing levels are inadequate for patient safety. I have filed 14 compliance tickets with no action. Dennis Pratt wrote something on his clipboard. He said, I will note that. He left. 2 weeks later, the audit report came back. Facility and compliance, no corrective action required. Troy put the report on the bulletin board in the break room. He circled the word compliance in red marker and wrote underneath it, "This is what winning looks like." He left it there for a month. Every pharmacist who went to the break room saw it. Every pharmacist understood what it meant. The system has been checked. The system is fine. Stop complaining. I photographed the bulletin board. I saved it with the screenshots. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table longer than usual. I read through all 3 notebooks from the beginning. 2 hours. Every entry, every date, every name, every drug, every timer status, every ticket number, every no action needed. I made a second cup of coffee. I thought about my father behind his counter, holding a prescription up to the light. I thought about Mrs. Parsons and her 3 seconds. I thought about Mr. Ruiz and his double dose. I thought about Mrs. Bryce and her warfarin label. I thought about Tyler and his amphetamines. I thought about Mr. Stefano and his 8 medications and Kristen's 51 seconds. And I thought about the people I did not know about. The near misses that happened when I was behind the drive-through glass. The ones Kristen did not catch because she did not look. The ones the system approved because the system only saw green. The people who went home with the wrong pill and never knew it because nothing happened, because they got lucky, because the dosage was not quite wrong enough to cause visible damage. How many of those were there? How many times had the system failed and nobody noticed because the failure was small and quiet and did not send anyone to the ICU? I did not know. That was the thing that kept me awake. Not the failures I documented, the failures I could not see. In year 6, I saw something that stayed with me. A young woman came to the pickup window with a baby in a carrier. She was maybe 25, tired eyes. The baby was asleep. The prescription was for liquid amoxicillin, a pediatric antibiotic, standard. I watched through the internal window as a technician handed her the bag. The woman looked at the bottle, looked at the label, looked at her baby, and then looked up at the technician and said, "Is this right? It says 2.5 milliliters. The doctor said 2. The technician looked at the screen and said, "That is what the system shows." The woman said, "Okay," and walked out. I pulled the record later. The prescription was for 2 milliliters. The system had rounded up. 2.5 milliliters instead of 2. For an adult, the difference is nothing. For an 8-pound infant, it is a 25% overdose. The system had rounded up, and the system said green, and the technician said, "That is what the system shows." And the mother, who had asked the right question, who had trusted her instincts, accepted the answer because the system was supposed to know better than she did. I found the woman's name in the record. I called her. I explained the correct dosage. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "So the pharmacy gave me the wrong amount for my baby." I said, "The pharmacy gave you a rounded dosage that was higher than what your doctor prescribed. I am calling to make sure you use the correct amount." She said, "Thank you." She hung up. I filed the report, ticket number 4891. Resolved, no action needed. I want to tell you about the day everything changed. Not because I decided to act. I had been acting for 5 years, in the only way I knew how, one notebook entry at a time. The day everything changed was the day the thing I had been documenting finally happened. Saturday, October 14th. I was not on shift. Kristen was working the main station alone. The technicians were filling prescriptions. The timer was running. Eleanor Alderman, 68 years old, type 2 diabetes managed with glyburide, rheumatoid arthritis managed with methotrexate, blood pressure managed with lisinopril. 3 medications, each with its own interaction profile. Mrs. Alderman came in every month. She was kind and quiet and always said thank you. The prescription that came in that Saturday was a refill, glyburide, but the dosage in the system was wrong. Someone, a doctor's office, a data entry clerk, the autofill algorithm, it does not matter, had doubled the dose. Instead of 5 milligrams, the system showed 10. Glyburide at 10 milligrams for a 68-year-old woman on methotrexate was a recipe for catastrophic hypoglycemia. Her blood sugar would plummet. She could lose consciousness. She could go into a coma. She could die. Kristen verified the prescription in 47 seconds. Green timer, no second check, no call to the doctor, no flag on the dosage change. The system saw glyburide, saw the patient, saw the insurance authorization, and said green. Kristen saw green and moved on. 47 seconds. The bag went into the pickup bin. Prescription label facing out. White bag, stapled shut. Mrs. Alderman picked it up at 11:15. She thanked the technician at the window. The technician said, "Have a nice weekend." Mrs. Alderman went home. She took the pill Saturday evening with dinner, the way she always did. She took the second pill Sunday morning with breakfast. By Sunday at 2 in the afternoon, her blood sugar had dropped to 31. Normal is between 70 and 100. 31 is the number where your brain starts shutting down. She was sitting in her kitchen when her vision went gray. She reached for the table and missed. She fell. Her neighbor heard the sound through the wall and called 911. The paramedics found her on the kitchen floor. Unresponsive. Blood glucose 24. They started an IV dextrose push in the ambulance. At Ridley Memorial, they stabilized her in the ER and moved her to the ICU. She was on a ventilator for 6 hours. Her daughter Carol drove from Wilmington and arrived at the hospital at 9 p.m., and the first thing she saw was her 68-year-old mother with a tube down her throat and a monitor beeping in a rhythm that sounded like a metronome counting down. Monday morning, 7:03 a.m. I was behind the drive-thru window, setting up for the day. My phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize. "Is this the pharmacy? My name is Carol Alderman. My mother is Eleanor Alderman. She is in the ICU at Ridley Memorial. They said it was hypoglycemic shock. They said it was for medication." I stood there with the phone pressed to my ear and the fluorescent lights buzzing above me, and I felt the floor tilt. Not because I was surprised, because I had been waiting for this call for 5 years. I had been writing it down in notebooks, and filing tickets, and screenshotting resolutions, and standing at the drive-thru window watching the system fail in slow motion. And now, the system had finally done what I always knew it would do. It had hurt someone. I went to the dispensing log. I pulled up Mrs. Alderman's prescription. October 14th. Glyburide, 10 milligrams. Verified by K. Wilder. 47 seconds. Green timer. No second check. No physician callback. I called Troy. I said, "Eleanor Alderman is in the ICU because of a dosage error on a prescription verified in 47 seconds without a second check." Troy said, "That is a human error. Kristen made a mistake. It is not a systems issue." I said, "The system removed the second check. The system set a timer that rewards speed over accuracy. The system ignored 14 reports that this would happen. The system is you, Troy." There was a silence. Then he said, "Maggie, I am going to pretend you did not say that. Take the rest of the day." I did not take the rest of the day. I finished my shift, 8 hours behind the drive-thru glass, handing bags to patients, saying, "Have a good day," to people who did not look at me, while somewhere across town, Eleanor Alderman was lying in a hospital bed with her daughter holding her hand. I drove home. I parked. I walked up the stairs. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, looking at the drawer. My hands were steady. They are always steady. That is what 31 years behind a counter does to your hands. But something inside them was different. Something that felt less like patience and more like purpose. I opened it. 7 years. 3 notebooks and a USB drive. 2,547 days of entries. Hundreds of red timers. 14 compliance tickets with the same answer. No action needed. Screenshots. Memos. The email from Troy dated March 14th of the second year. The one where he wrote, "Verification timers are mandatory. Non-compliance will result in disciplinary action up to and including termination." Mandatory. Not recommended. Mandatory. The state board says 2 minutes minimum. Troy said 90 seconds maximum, and he put it in writing. I also had the incident log for Mrs. Alderman. Date, drug, dosage, verification time, verifier, timer color, second check, none. And I had the audit report. Facility in compliance. No corrective action required. I sat there for a long time. I drank a cup of coffee. I drank another. Then I picked up the phone and called Carol Alderman. I said, "My name is Maggie Cernak. I am a pharmacist at ValueScript. I want to tell you something about what happened to your mother, and I want to tell you the truth." Carol Alderman listened. She did not interrupt. When I finished, she said, "Do you have documentation?" I said, 7 years of it. There was a pause. I could hear Carol breathing. Then she said, "My mother is awake now. She does not remember falling. She asked me why she is in the hospital. I told her. She said, 'But I always take my pills the way they tell me.' She still trusts the pharmacy, Maggie. She still trusts you." That was the sentence that broke something in me. Not anger, something quieter, something that felt like a door closing and another one opening. Mrs. Alderman still trusted the pharmacy. She still trusted the system. She did not know that the system had been designed to betray her trust as efficiently as possible. Carol said, "I am going to give you a name. Daniel Keohane. He is an attorney. He handles medical negligence. Call him." I called Daniel Keohane the next morning. He had an office in Media, Pennsylvania. Small firm, 3 attorneys. He wore reading glasses on a chain around his neck and had a yellow legal pad that looked like it had been through a war. I sat across from his desk and put the notebooks and the USB drive in front of him. He picked up the first notebook. He read the first page, then the second. Then he started flipping faster, stopping every few pages, running his finger down the columns. Date, drug, error type, timer status, compliance ticket number, resolution. After 20 minutes, he put the notebook down and took off his glasses and said, "Maggie, this is not a complaint. This is an indictment." I said, "I did not plan for it to be." He said, "What did you plan for?" I said, "I plan to keep my promise." He looked at me. He put his glasses back on. He picked up the second notebook and started reading. Another 20 minutes. Then the third. He looked at the USB drive but did not open it yet. He wrote something on his legal pad, a single word that I could not read upside down. Then he said, "Maggie, in 22 years of practice, I have never seen a client walk in with a case already built. You built this. 7 years. Every entry, every ticket, every screenshot. You did not know you were building a case, but you were." I said, "I was building a record." He said, "Same thing." Keohane was not flashy. He was not the kind of attorney who advertised on bus benches or bought television spots. He was careful and methodical, and he read everything twice. I liked him immediately. He reminded me of my father, not in appearance, but in pace. He took his time. He did not skip steps. He did not trust the system to do the work. Keohane laid it out. There were 3 lanes, and each one could move independently. The first was the State Pharmacy Board, a formal complaint citing specific violations of minimum verification time, mandatory staffing levels, and the suppression of internal safety reports. The second was the civil case, medical malpractice on behalf of the Alderman family, targeting both the pharmacist of record and the corporation's policies that created the conditions for the error. The third was the compliance recording. I had not told him about the recording yet. 3 days after the Alderman incident, I called ValueScript's corporate compliance hotline. I used my personal phone. I pressed the button to record the call. I identified myself by name and employee number and said, "I am calling to ask about the verification timer policy for licensed pharmacists." The representative said, "The timers are guidelines. They are not mandatory. They are intended to assist with workflow efficiency." I said, "I have an email from District Manager Troy Henning dated March 14, 2020, stating that verification timers are mandatory and that non-compliance will result in disciplinary action. Is that email consistent with corporate policy?" Pause. Long pause. "I will need to escalate this to a supervisor. Can we call you back?" They never called back. The recording was 4 minutes and 11 seconds. I saved it in 3 places. Keohane listened to the recording and said, "This is the gap. Corporate says guidelines. Troy says mandatory. That is a compliance fracture. If the board asks for the email and corporate denies the mandate, the email proves they are lying. If they admit it, they are admitting the violation." I said, "When do we file?" He said, All at once. Monday for the board, Tuesday for the civil suit. By Wednesday, they will know both are coming from the same source, and they will not have time to coordinate a single response. I wanted that. I wanted them to feel what it was like to have 3 things happening at once, with no time to think. I wanted Troy to look at a screen that was flashing red and know he had 90 seconds to respond, and know that 90 seconds was not enough. The weeks between the decision and the filing were the longest of my life. Keohane needed time to organize the appendices, to verify every entry, to cross-reference every compliance ticket with the corporate records he subpoenaed. I kept going to work. I kept standing behind the drive-through glass. I kept filling prescriptions and saying, "Have a good day," and writing in the notebook at night. But something had shifted. The weight in my chest was not lighter. It was different. It had a direction now. I visited Mrs. Alderman once, at her daughter's house in Wilmington. She was sitting in an armchair by the window. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her hands trembled when she reached for her tea. She said, "Maggie, you always took care of me at the pharmacy." I said, "I tried." She said, "I know you did." She did not ask what had happened. She did not ask about the dosage or the timer or the system. She just held my hand for a moment and said, "Thank you for coming." I drove home and sat in the car in the parking lot for 20 minutes before I could go inside. We filed on a Monday morning in January. Keohane sent the board complaint, 47 pages plus appendices, every notebook entry transcribed and indexed, every screenshot printed and annotated, every compliance ticket with its corresponding "no action needed" resolution highlighted. The email from Troy with the word "mandatory" underlined, the compliance call recording on a USB drive with a full transcript attached, the Alderman incident log, cross-referenced with the dispensing system records that Keohane had obtained through discovery. Tuesday, Keohane filed the civil suit on behalf of the Alderman family. Medical malpractice, corporate negligence, suppression of safety protocols, failure to act on reported near-miss events. The complaint ran to 31 pages. It named ValueScript as the primary defendant, Troy Henning as a contributing party, and referenced the board filing for context. Wednesday morning, ValueScript's legal department received simultaneous notice of both filings. I know this because Keohane told me he timed it. He had filed the board complaint by certified mail on Friday, so it would arrive Monday. He had filed the civil suit electronically on Tuesday. He had sent the notice letters to ValueScript's general counsel by overnight delivery on Tuesday afternoon. 3 envelopes arrived at 3 different desks on the same morning. I went to work on Wednesday. I stood behind the drive-through window and filled prescriptions and said, "Thank you, have a good day," to every patient who pulled up, and I waited. Troy did not come to the pharmacy that day, or the next. On Friday, I received an email, not from Troy, but from the regional vice president, informing me that Troy Henning had been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. The state board opened a formal investigation 3 weeks later. They sent their own auditors, not Dennis Pratt, not a man with a clipboard and 45 minutes and a destination already in mind. A team of 3 investigators spent 4 days in the pharmacy. They wore badges. They carried laptops. They sat in the back office and asked questions for hours. They interviewed every pharmacist and technician in the district. They pulled system logs going back 5 years. They reviewed the timer data, every green, every red, every alert, every acknowledgement. They subpoenaed the compliance ticket records and compared them to the corporate responses. One of the investigators, a woman named Dr. Yoon, came to my station on the second day. She asked me to walk her through a typical verification. I showed her. I picked up a prescription, read the label, checked the drug against the patient profile, checked the dosage, checked the interaction panel, checked the frequency, checked the quantity, and verified. It took me 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Dr. Yoon wrote that number down. Then she asked me to show her what the timer looked like when it triggered. I filled a test prescription slowly, on purpose. At 90 seconds, the screen flashed red. Efficiency alert! Dr. Yoon stared at the screen for a long time. She wrote something in her notebook. She did not say anything. She did not need to. I do not know what Troy said in his interview. I do not know what the corporate lawyers told him to say. I know that his interview lasted 3 hours and that he came to the pharmacy the next day to collect some personal items from his office. He did not speak to anyone. He did not look at me. He walked in, put some things in a box, and walked out. The lanyard was gone. I know what the board found because their findings were published 6 months later. The board found that ValueScript's Northeast District, under Troy Henning's management, had systematically implemented verification timers below the state-mandated minimum. The board found that internal safety reports had been routinely closed without investigation. The board found that staffing reductions had created conditions inconsistent with safe pharmacy practice. The board found that the corporate compliance hotline's characterization of timers as guidelines was contradicted by written directives from district management, creating a compliance gap that exposed patients to preventable risk. Troy Henning's Pharmacy Oversight Authority was suspended. He was not a pharmacist. He did not have a license to suspend, but the board revoked his authority to manage licensed pharmacy operations. He could still work for ValueScript, he just could not touch a pharmacy. I heard later that he was transferred to the logistics division, warehousing, supply chain, shipping routes, the kind of work where a 90-second timer cannot kill anyone. I do not know if that is true. I did not check. I did not need to. ValueScript conducted its own audit, a real one this time, not the Dennis Pratt clipboard tour. 12 pharmacies in the Northeast District. 3 weeks. The results were not made public, but the effects were visible. Within 2 months, the verification timer was eliminated across all 340 ValueScript locations nationwide. Not adjusted, eliminated. The countdown clock disappeared from every screen. The staffing policy changed. 2 pharmacists on the floor during peak hours became mandatory. Not a guideline, not a recommendation, mandatory. The compliance ticket system was restructured. An external ombudsman was appointed to review safety reports quarterly. The board also issued a recommendation to the state legislature. A minimum verification time of 120 seconds should be codified in statute, not just in board guidelines. The bill was introduced 4 months later. I do not know if it passed. I stopped following it. The fight was not mine anymore. I had done what I could do. The rest belonged to people in suits in Harrisburg. The Alderman family settled. I do not know the amount. Keohane told me it was substantial but not public. Carol Alderman called me on a Tuesday evening and said, "It is done. Thank you, Maggie." I said, "How is your mother?" She said, "She is home. She is okay. She bought a pill organizer with the days of the week on it. She checks every pill against the label before she takes it. She never used to do that." I said, "She should not have to." Carol said, "No, she should not." There was a pause. Then, "She does not go to ValueScript anymore." I said, "I do not blame her." Kristen Wilder was not disciplined. I made sure of that. I told Keohane early on, Kristen is not the problem. Kristen is what the system created. She did what she was trained to do and rewarded for doing. If you punish Kristen, you are punishing the last person in a chain of failures that started with a district manager who never touched a pill bottle. Keohane agreed. The board agreed. Kristen kept her license. She transferred to a different district. I heard she started doing second checks. I hope that is true. I still work at ValueScript. Same store, same counter. I am back at the main station now. The drive-through window was reassigned to a technician. There is a new district manager. Her name is Patricia Odom. She has a pharmacy degree. She has worked behind a counter. The first time she visited, she asked me if I had any concerns. I said, "Not today." She said, "When you do, call me directly." She left her cell phone number on a sticky note. I keep the sticky note in the drawer next to the notebooks. It is a small yellow square with a phone number written in blue ink. It sits on top of the third notebook. Sometimes I look at it and think about what it means, that someone in a position of authority over a pharmacy actually wants to know when something is wrong. That should not feel remarkable. That should be the minimum. But after 7 years of Troy Henning, It feels like a revolution. Janet Morrow started eating lunch with me again. She never apologized for the years she kept her distance, and I never asked her to. We both understood. She was protecting herself. I would have done the same. We eat in the break room now, at the small table by the window. She brings soup. I bring coffee. We do not talk about Troy. There are things that changed and things that did not. The timer is gone. The staffing is better. The compliance system is not a black hole anymore. Those things changed. But Mrs. Alderman spent 3 days on a ventilator because a system designed by Troy Henning told a 29-year-old pharmacist that 47 seconds was fast enough. That did not change. That happened. It is in the record. It is in the notebook. The first week after the timer was removed, I stood at the main station and verified a prescription for a new patient. An elderly man with a walker and a hearing aid and a list of medications that filled half a page. I checked every interaction. I called his doctor about a dosage that looked high. The call took 6 minutes. The screen did not flash. The screen did not say anything. It just waited for me to finish. I finished. I printed the label. I put the bottle in the bag. I walked to the counter and said, "Here you go. Call us if anything feels different." My father's words, coming out of my mouth, in a pharmacy that had almost forgotten what they meant. Sometimes I stand at the counter after closing, and the pharmacy is quiet, and the fluorescent lights are humming, and I count the bottles on the shelf. Not because I need to, because my hands remember how. Because counting is what I do. Counting pills, counting seconds, counting names. Troy Henning counted throughput. He counted fill rates. He counted bonuses. He counted the number of pharmacists he could remove from a shift and still keep the green light on. He counted everything except the thing that mattered. I keep hearing the ventilator. That is the part nobody tells you about. When you are right, when you spent 7 years being right and filing reports and writing in notebooks and standing at the drive-through window knowing exactly what was going to happen, and then it happens, you do not feel vindicated. You feel hollowed out. Because being right meant someone got hurt. Being right meant Mrs. Alderman woke up in a hospital bed with her daughter crying next to her and tubes in her arm because 47 seconds was not enough time to notice that the number on the screen was wrong. I could have been there that Saturday. If Troy had not moved me to the drive-through, if Troy had not cut the second pharmacist from the morning shift, if the timer had not been set at 90 seconds, if any one of those things had been different, I would have been standing at that counter, and I would have caught it, because I always caught it. But that is not how systems work. Systems do not fail because one person makes one mistake. Systems fail because someone at the top decides that speed matters more than safety, and then builds a structure that makes that decision invisible, and then punishes anyone who tries to make it visible again. Troy built that structure. ValueScript let him. The compliance department closed every ticket. The auditor checked every box. And Mrs. Alderman took a pill that should never have been in her bottle. My father used to stand behind the counter at Cernak Family Pharmacy and talk to his regulars about their grandchildren and their gardens and their hip replacements. He would take a prescription and hold it up to the light and read it slowly and then say, "Give me just a few minutes." And he would walk to the back and pull the bottle and count the pills and check the label and check it again, and then walk back to the front and put the bag on the counter and say, "Here you go. Call me if anything feels different." That was a pharmacy. That was what it was supposed to be. A place where someone who knew what they were doing took the time to do it right, because the person on the other side of the counter was trusting them with their body. Troy Henning turned it into a drive-through, a countdown clock, a fill rate, a quarterly bonus for the fastest hands. And when the fastest hands gave the wrong pill to the wrong person at the wrong dose, he called it a human error and told me to take the day off. I did not take the day off. I finished my shift. I went home. I opened the drawer. The notebooks are still there. In the kitchen drawer, under the phone book nobody uses. 3 soft blue covers, worn at the corners. A USB drive in a small plastic bag. 7 years. I do not open them anymore. I do not need to. The board has copies. Hane has copies. The record exists. But sometimes, late at night, when the apartment is quiet and the streetlight outside my window makes a pattern on the wall, I think about the first entry. March 22nd, 2019. The first night I sat at that table and picked up a pen and started writing. I did not know what I was building. I did not have a plan. I did not call a lawyer. I did not contact a journalist. I did not organize a protest. I just wrote down what happened because my father taught me that writing it down matters, because paper does not forget, because someone has to count. I am not a hero. I am not a whistleblower. I am not brave. I am a pharmacist who counted. I counted pills. I counted seconds. I counted names. And when Troy Henning decided that counting was too slow, I started writing. Every pill bottle has a label. Every label has a name. I wrote down every name Troy Henning told me to stop caring about, and when the time came, I handed in the notebook and let the names speak for themselves. Mrs. Alderman is home now. She goes to a different pharmacy, a small one on a corner with a bell on the door. I have never been there, but Carol told me the pharmacist knows her mother's name. He asks about her garden. He takes his time. That is all I ever wanted. Enough time to get it right. Enough time to keep the promise. My father would have called that a pharmacy. I still have the bell from the old store, the one that hung on the door at Cernak Family Pharmacy. My mother gave it to me when she moved into the care facility. It is small and brass and tarnished. I keep it on the shelf above the kitchen table, next to a photograph of my father behind the counter. In the photograph, he is holding a prescription up to the light. He is squinting. He is taking his time. Every pill bottle has a label. Every label has a name. I counted every one.